I've been welding at depth for 14 years. 14 years of compressed air, dry suits that smell like neoprene and sweat, and the endless black that never quite gets easier to look at. Most people assume deep sea welders are some kind of adrenaline junkies, risk takers with a death wish. That's not me. I'm methodical. I follow protocols. I've never had a serious incident, never bent a pipeline wrong, never missed a decompression stop. I'm alive because I treat the ocean like it's actively trying to kill me, because it is. The work isn't glamorous, it's precise. I descend in a one-man submersible or with a partner if it's a big job, usually to depths between 2,000 and 4,000 feet, where the pressure is enough to crush a car like a beer can. I weld subsea pipelines, the ones carrying oil, natural gas, or in some cases, things they don't really talk about in the briefings. The darkness down there is absolute. Your torch is the only light, and it only reaches about 30 feet before the black swallows everything. You have to trust your training, your equipment, and the voices in your headset. I'd been with the company for 10 years when they called me in for this job. It wasn't unusual. Maintenance contract on an old pipeline, routine inspection, some repairs. The pipeline in question hadn't been serviced in 37 years. That wasn't uncommon either. Some of these rigs from the 80s just keep running until something forces maintenance. The client wanted to extend the pipeline's operational life another decade, so they needed someone to go down and assess the structural integrity, reinforce weak sections, and do some comprehensive welding where corrosion had compromised the seams. They paired me with Marcus, a younger guy, early 30s, confident, good instincts. We'd worked together before. He was solid. He didn't panic, didn't rush, and he didn't ask stupid questions. The kind of partner you want 3,000 feet below the surface, where the pressure would kill you in seconds if your suit failed. The briefing was standard. The pipeline ran from a platform about 5 miles offshore, descending in a gentle slope toward the continental shelf. Depth variations from 1,800 feet at the start to 3,200 feet at the terminus. Water temperature holding steady around 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Current minimal. No unusual seismic activity. The submersible we'd be using was a 2-person vehicle, more like a mechanical cocoon than anything else. Cramped, technical, reliable. "She's been down there a long time," the safety officer said, showing us the schematic. "Last inspection was 1986, before digital records. We've got paper documentation, but some of it's hard to read. Best guess is the pipeline's been carrying stable flow the whole time, but you'll want to check for microfractures, corrosion creep, maybe some settling if the seabed shifted. Standard, everything standard." The descent took 40 minutes. We had to be meticulous about it. Rushing too. Depth can cause nitrogen narcosis, mess with your judgment, make you stupid at exactly the moment you need to be sharp. Marcus and I ran through our systems checks 3 times each. Sonar operational, torch ignition verified, welding equipment calibrated, communication line clear. We maintained constant contact with the surface vessel. As we dropped through the layers of the ocean, the light outside our viewport changed from murky blue-green to absolute black. The pressure gauge climbed steadily. My suit adapted automatically, the internal pressure compensating to keep me alive. It's a strange sensation, that constant squeeze, like being slowly compressed into a diamond. The ocean at that depth is dead silent on the inside of a submersible. The only sounds are the systems, the hum of the motor, the tick of the pressure compensators, Marcus's breathing in my headset, and the occasional crackle of static from the surface. We approached the pipeline's start point, right on schedule. It emerged from the darkness like a ghost, massive and industrial, impossibly old, yet somehow still functional. The diameter was about 3 feet, standard for deep water infrastructure. Our torch beams played across its surface, revealing years of accumulation, barnacles, sediment, a thin layer of biological life that thrived even in this lightless, pressurized world. "Surface, we have visual on the target," I reported. "Beginning exterior assessment." "Copy that," came the response. "Run your standard scan, then we'll begin the first welding section. Take your time." We maneuvered closer. I piloted while Marcus handled the external camera, documenting everything. The pipeline looked intact. Better than I'd expected for something that hadn't been serviced since before most modern dive computers existed. There was some corrosion, sure, but nothing catastrophic. The seams looked solid. We worked our way along the first 500 meters, checking sections, marking weak points. Marcus was calling out coordinates and observations. Everything was routine, professional, boring even, and I liked it that way. Boring meant safe. Boring meant going home. Then I saw the first anomaly. It was near a joint in the pipeline, about 2 kilometers down the route. A depression in the metal, like something had pushed against it from the inside. Not a dent. Those came from external pressure, from undersea rocks or equipment impacts. This was different. It was as if the metal had been forced outward, then somehow settled back into place, leaving only a subtle deformation. "You seeing this?" I asked Marcus. "Yeah, mark it. Could be internal pressure spike at some point. Happens." Except it didn't really happen. Not like this. Not regularly enough to matter. But Marcus was right. It could be anything. Could be nothing. I marked the coordinates and we continued. We got to the section I was supposed to work on, the main welding job, about 3 kilometers down the route. It was a section where the seams had degraded enough that they needed reinforcement. Standard work. I'd done it 100 times. I maneuvered the submersible into position and began my pre-welding checks. Marcus monitored the systems from his station. The torch was warm, the welding rod loaded, my hands steady through the mechanical arms that translated my movements. "Beginning weld sequence," I said into the comm. "Copy, standing by," Surface responded. I brought the torch down to the seam. The metal began to glow orange in the darkness. I was concentrating on the weld pattern, maintaining the correct angle, the correct speed, all the things that keep a weld strong and safe. The mechanical arms moved smoothly, responding to my input. That's when I heard it. A knock, not a vibration through the hull, not the sound of shifting metal or equipment noise. A distinct, deliberate knock, coming from somewhere inside the pipe itself. I jerked back, instinctively pulling the torch away from the weld. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Marcus was looking at the monitoring station. "That knock. It came from inside the pipe." "Inside?" Marcus leaned forward. "Like from the pipeline?" "Yeah, from inside." We both sat in silence for a moment, listening. The submersible's equipment hummed. The water pressed down on us. The darkness outside was total. Then it came again. A knock, deliberate, rhythmic, definitely coming from within the metal tube that ran through the cold deep before us. "Surface," I said carefully. "We're hearing some unusual acoustic activity. Sounds like knocking from inside the pipeline. Can you verify anything on your end?" A pause, longer than it should have been. "Say again?" The surface controller sounded confused. "Knocking from inside." Affirmative, rhythmic, deliberate. Another pause. "That's not possible," Surface said. "The pipeline's been in operation for 37 years. It's sealed on both ends. There's nothing in there that could make noise. Nothing that could make noise. But something was making noise. And I was beginning to understand that this job was not going to be routine after all. The knock came again, 3 times, deliberate, patient, like someone tapping on glass to get your attention. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm going to continue with the weld. It's probably just, I don't know, pressure variance, something settling in the line." "Yeah," Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. "Could be. Old pipes shift sometimes, especially if there's been thermal cycling over 37 years. Thermal cycling, that made sense. Hot product flowing through, cooling when idle, the metal expanding and contracting over decades. That could cause internal deformation, could cause stress points, could cause sounds." I brought the torch back down to the seam. The metal began to glow again, and I focused on the weld pattern. My hands were steady. They had to be. One mistake, one tremor that messed up the metallurgy, and this entire section would be compromised. I pushed the other sound out of my mind. The weld was going well. I was about 2 minutes in, making good progress, when the knocking started again. This time, it wasn't random. It was loud, insistent. 3 quick knocks, a pause, then 2 more. Over and over, rapid fire, like someone hammering from the inside. "You're hearing this, right?" I said to Marcus. I pulled the torch back again. Yeah, I hear it." His voice had changed. Tighter, less confident. That's not normal." The knocking continued. It was coming from directly ahead of us, from the pipe section I'd been welding. The sound echoed through the metal hull of the submersible, almost musical in a deeply wrong way. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. "Surface, we're getting sustained acoustic activity," I reported. My voice was steady, but my heart wasn't. Years of training kept the panic out of my tone. "It's consistent. The knocking stopped abruptly. We waited. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. Just the hum of the submersible's systems, the breathing of 2 men who suddenly had nowhere to put their attention except the darkness outside. "Maybe it dislodged whatever was loose," Marcus offered. "Banged against something and fell back into place." "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. I waited another full minute. Nothing. Just the normal sounds of the submersible, the distant crackle of static in our headsets. The control room on the surface was quiet too. They were listening, waiting to hear what we'd report next. "Surface, we're going to proceed with caution," I said. "I'm going to resume welding, but I want to increase monitoring. If we hear anything else unusual, we abort and return to the vessel." "Copy that," Surface responded. They sounded uncertain too. Whatever protocols existed for this situation, they weren't in any of our training manuals. I moved the torch back into position. The metal was still warm from before. I restarted the weld sequence, maintaining focus, trying to block out everything except the seam in front of me, the angle of the torch, the flow of the welding rod. For almost 5 minutes, nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing, the controlled hiss of the welding equipment, Marcus's calm monitoring of the systems. I was starting to relax. It had probably been nothing. Just metal fatigue, acoustic stress, something that made sense in the rational world of physics and engineering. Then the knocking came back, but this time it was different. It wasn't coming from the front of the pipe where I'd been working. It was coming from multiple locations simultaneously, from the section to my left, from the section below us, from somewhere far back down the pipeline. Multiple knocking sounds, overlapping, creating a kind of chaotic percussion that seemed to move along the length of the pipe like something was traveling through it. "What the hell is that?" Marcus's professional composure cracked, just slightly, but I heard it. "I don't know," I said. I was pulling the torch back, backing the submersible away from the pipeline. "Surface, we're hearing multiple acoustic events. This is not consistent with normal pipe behavior. We're disengaging from the work area. Copy, return to, wait, hold on." I could hear voices in the background on the surface, overlapping, urgent. Someone was conferring with someone else. Then, "Can you get a visual inside the pipe? Use the camera?" "We can try," I said. But I didn't move the submersible back in. Instead, I extended one of the external camera arms toward the pipe's opening. It was a risk. Anything that got too close to that opening was a risk now. Marcus worked the camera controls. The external feed appeared on his monitor, and he relayed what he was seeing. "Interior looks normal. I'm seeing sediment, some biological growth. Nothing unusual from this angle." "Keep looking," Surface instructed. "Pan the camera, see if you can detect any movement." The camera rotated slowly, giving us different views of the pipe's interior. It was standard subsea pipeline interior. Nothing surprising. Boring, really. Exactly what it should look like. Then Marcus stopped the camera movement. "There," he said quietly. "Did you see that?" I leaned over to look at his monitor. The camera was pointing into the darkness of the pipe. At first I saw nothing, just the interior walls, the sediment, the emptiness. Then something moved. Not much, just a ripple in the sediment, like something had disturbed it. Something large had just passed by, moving deeper into the pipe, away from our position. "Surface, we have possible internal movement detected," Marcus reported. His voice was tight. "Something just disturbed the bottom layer. Could be a..." The knocking resumed, but louder now. Much louder. It sounded angry, frantic. Knock, 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 knock. Continuous, no rhythm, just desperate percussion echoing through the metal. "We're pulling back," I said. It wasn't a request. I was moving the submersible away from the pipeline, increasing distance, putting space between us and whatever was in there. "Surface, we're aborting the weld sequence. We're returning to safe distance for assessment." "Copy. Stand by." More background voices, more conferring. I could hear the stress now. Whatever this was, it wasn't in any of their protocols either. We'd moved about 50 yards from the pipeline when the knocking finally stopped again. We floated there in the darkness, just watching the illuminated length of the pipeline through our viewport, waiting for something else to happen. It didn't. Just the pipe, inert and massive and impossibly old, sitting on the bottom of the ocean like it had for the last 37 years. "Surface," I said, "we need to know what's in that pipeline, what it's carrying, what could possibly be alive in there." The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. Surface didn't know either, and worse, I was beginning to suspect that whoever had sealed this pipeline 37 years ago might not have known either, or if they did, they'd never bothered to tell anyone. The silence from Surface lasted 30 seconds, then a minute, then 2. "Surface?" I called. "Do you copy?" "We copy," came the response. A different voice now, older, someone with more authority. "This is Operations Director Chen. We're assessing the situation from here. Sir, we need to know what product this pipeline is carrying. We need to know the operational parameters, the composition, everything," Marcus said. He was looking at me, and I could see the concern in his eyes, even through the viewport of our helmets. This is a safety issue. We're pulling your work orders now, Chen said. Stand by. Another long pause. I could picture them in the control room up there, frantically searching through databases, trying to find 37-year-old documentation that had probably been misplaced or digitized poorly or just lost to bureaucracy. 37 years was a long time, long enough for people to retire, long enough for records to go missing. The pipeline is marked as carrying synthetic oil, Chen finally said. Refined product, standard subsea transport. It's been in operation continuously since 1986. Standard subsea transport doesn't knock, I said. It doesn't move. It doesn't... The knocking started again, softer this time, almost tentative, like something was testing whether we were still there. Marcus adjusted the external camera, pointing it back at the pipe. We both watched the monitor. There was movement inside, definite movement now. A shape, dark and large, was moving through the pipeline. I could only see pieces of it, something that rippled the sediment, something that pressed against the interior walls of the pipe, something that definitely had mass and intention. Surface, we have visual confirmation of large-scale internal movement, Marcus reported. His voice had taken on the clipped, professional tone of someone pushing through fear with training. The object is substantial, definitely not a standard deep-water organism. Confirm dimensions if possible, Chen requested. Marcus was trying, panning the camera, trying to get a sense of scale, but the pipeline's interior was dark beyond the camera's illumination range. We could see pieces, a section of something smooth, something that might have been a joint or appendage, but nothing that made sense when you tried to assemble it into a coherent picture. Too dark, Marcus said. I need to get closer with a light source. Negative, I said immediately. We're not getting closer to that thing. We need to know what we're dealing with, Marcus countered. If it's dangerous, we need to report it. If it's just some kind of organism, that's different, but we can't tell from here. He was right, and I hated that he was right. We were trained to gather data. We were trained to handle ambiguous situations with logic and procedure. But everything in my gut was screaming that getting closer to whatever was knocking from inside that pipe was a mistake. Surface, requesting authorization to investigate further, Marcus said. There was a pause. I could imagine Chen in that control room, thinking through the liability, the risk, the potential consequences. Then, approved, but carefully. If anything changes, anything at all, you abort immediately. I maneuvered the submersible back toward the pipeline, but slowly. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. The external lights on the front of the submersible would cut through the water and illuminate the pipe's interior better than the camera alone. As we got closer, I could see inside more clearly. The pipeline's opening was dark, but as our lights penetrated deeper, details emerged. The interior walls showed sediment, decades of accumulation, but there were also gouges, long parallel marks as if something heavy had dragged itself along the interior, over and over, wearing away the settled sediment and leaving score marks on the metal beneath. Fresh score marks. Recent. Do you see this? I pointed at the monitor for Marcus. Yeah, that's recent. That's not from 37 years ago. No, I agreed. It's not. I brought the submersible even closer until our external lights were practically shining directly into the pipe's opening. We could see deeper now. The interior stretched away into darkness, but our lights caught something. A shape. Definitely a shape. Large and pale, deeper inside the pipe. It wasn't moving now, but I could see it clearly enough to know it wasn't any deep water organism I'd ever heard of. The knocking started again, but this time it was different. It wasn't frantic anymore. It was rhythmic, purposeful. Knock, knock, knock. Even intervals. Almost like, "Is that communication?" Marcus whispered. Before I could answer, the thing inside the pipe moved. Not much, just enough to shift position. But as it did, our lights caught more of it. I saw what might have been a head. Elongated, smooth, with an opening that could have been an eye or a mouth. I saw what might have been limbs, jointed in ways that didn't match anything natural. I saw the texture of its skin, if it was skin, something that looked almost metallic in places, organic in others, and then it was moving, quickly, coming toward us, toward the pipe opening, toward the submersible. "Back up!" I yelled. I was already pulling the control stick, moving us away from the pipeline opening. "Back up! Back up! Back up!" The thing emerged partway from the pipe, following our movement. It was massive, far larger than should have fit inside a 3-foot diameter pipeline. Its body compressed, contracted, moving in ways that violated every law of physics I understood. It reached toward us, and I saw limbs, too many limbs, each one segmented and wrong. Then it stopped, just froze there, half emerging from the pipe, reaching toward us, but not advancing further. "Surface! Surface! We have a..." Marcus was fumbling with the words, unable to articulate what we were seeing. "We have something. We have an entity of unknown origin. It's not from Earth. It's not..." "Calm down," Chen's voice cut through the panic. "Describe what you're seeing." But I was already moving us further back, putting distance between us and the pipe. The thing didn't follow. It just stayed there, half emerged, its impossible limbs reaching through the water toward us, then slowly withdrawing back into the pipeline. "It's going back in," I reported. "It's retreating." The creature, and I'd given up pretending it was anything other than a creature, pulled itself back into the pipe with that same impossible compression, folding itself back into spaces too small for it. Within seconds, it was gone completely. The knocking stopped. "Surface," I said, my hand still shaking on the controls. "We need to know what that thing is. We need to know everything about this pipeline, because it's not carrying synthetic oil, and it's sure as hell not been sealed and undisturbed for 37 years. Another long pause from Surface. Longer than before. "Stand by," Chen said finally. "I'm placing a call to the client. This is above my clearance level. We're going to need more information before we decide what to do next." "More information?" Marcus laughed, but it came out hysterical. "We just saw something that shouldn't exist. You need to hold position and remain calm," Chen said. His voice had changed. It was quieter now, more careful, more guarded. "Do not engage further. Do not attempt additional investigation. Just hold your current position and maintain visual surveillance of the pipeline." "Sir, I don't think..." I started. "That's not a request," Chen said. "Hold position." And so we did. Marcus and I sat in that submersible, 2 miles below the surface, staring at a 3-foot diameter pipeline that was housing something impossible, and waited for someone on the surface to tell us what to do. The knocking didn't return, but I could feel it in there. I could feel it watching us from inside the darkness of that pipe. And I realized, with creeping certainty, that whatever had been sealed inside that pipeline for the last 37 years, it had been sealed in deliberately. The question was, why? And more importantly, What had been feeding it all this time? We waited for 3 hours. 3 hours of staring at that pipe. 3 hours of surface being completely silent except for occasional check-ins to confirm we were still in position, still alive, still sane. Marcus had tried to make conversation a few times, but it didn't take. We both knew that whatever was happening, it was happening above us now, in boardrooms and offices where people with real authority were making decisions that would determine what happened next. I tried not to think about the creature, about what I'd seen, about the way it had moved, not like anything biological, but with intention, with intelligence, the way it had reached toward us. Had it been curious, hungry? Did the distinction even matter? Surface, this is submersible one, I finally called. We're at 72% life support capacity. We need to know soon. Copy, Chen responded. His voice was different now, tired. We're waiting on authorization from the client. They're being less than cooperative about providing additional information. Less than cooperative? Marcus said. Sir, we saw... I know what you saw, Chen interrupted. I'm seeing the same feed you are, but our hands are tied until we get proper clearance to proceed. Proceed with what? That's what I wanted to ask. But I was beginning to understand. We were here because someone wanted us to open that pipe, not for maintenance, not for inspection, for retrieval. Sir, I said carefully, if you're thinking about breaching the pipeline, I need to recommend against that. We don't know what will happen. We don't know if that thing can survive outside the pipe. We don't know. Understood, Chen said. But we need to know what's inside. That's the priority now. It's a containment vessel, Marcus said, quietly, like he just realized it. That's what this is. The pipeline isn't carrying product. It never was. It's a containment system. Silence from surface, which was answer enough. How long has it been in there? I asked. We don't know, Chen admitted. The client isn't being forthcoming about the pipeline's history before 1986. Our records only go back to the original installation date, before 1986. That meant it had been in there for at least 37 years, but possibly much longer, possibly decades before that. Possibly. We have authorization, Chen said abruptly. The client has authorized a containment breach and recovery operation. You're going to use the cutting torch to open a section of the pipeline for inspection and potential specimen collection. Absolutely not, I said. No, we don't know what's in that pipe, and you're asking us to let it out. You're going to cut a section approximately 2 meters upstream from your current position, Chen continued, ignoring my objection. The section will be partially opened to allow visual inspection of the interior contents without full breach. A containment cage will be deployed from the surface vessel to capture any loose material. Chen, Marcus said, this is insane. We saw what's in there. If we open that pipe, that is a direct order, Chen said. His tone had hardened. You will proceed with the cutting sequence, or you will return to the surface immediately and be replaced by another team. Another team. There were other dive teams, other qualified welders who would take the job, probably without asking questions. And if Chen was willing to give that order, it meant whoever was above Chen, whoever was making the real decisions, had decided this had to happen, one way or another. I looked at Marcus. He looked at me. We'd been partners long enough to understand each other without speaking. He nodded slightly. We both knew we were out of options. Copy, I said. We're moving to the cut site now. I maneuvered the submersible upstream, positioning us about 2 meters from the first section of healthy pipe. My hands were shaking slightly as I began preparing the cutting torch. This was supposed to be a routine maintenance job. I was supposed to go home to my apartment, order Thai food, and watch Netflix on a Wednesday night. I was not supposed to be deliberately breaching a containment vessel that housed something impossible. "Torch is calibrated," Marcus said. His voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "We're ready to cut." "Proceed," Chen authorized. I brought the torch down to the pipe's exterior surface. The heat ignited, and the metal began to glow. I started the cutting sequence, a careful, controlled line that would section out a roughly 2-meter piece of pipe. This was precision work. The cut needed to be clean, even deep enough to sever the pipe wall, but not so violent that we damaged the structure. The cutting torch worked steadily. Orange light filled the darkness. Metal particles drifted away in the water, catching the light like fireflies before disappearing into the black. We were maybe 30 seconds into the cut when I heard it again. The knocking. But not from inside the pipe anymore. It was coming from all around us. The sound reverberated through the water, through the hull of the submersible surrounding us. Multiple sources, overlapping, creating a sound like 1,000 instruments tuning up at once, discordant, chaotic, and absolutely furious. "What the hell is that?" Marcus was staring at the external monitors, trying to locate the source. "There's more than one. There's surface. We're hearing multiple acoustic events, not just from the pipe, from all around us." "That's impossible," Chen said. "There's only one pipeline in that section." But I was already realizing the truth. There wasn't just one pipeline in this area. There was a network. And if one of them was a containment vessel, the cutting torch continued its work. I couldn't stop it without aborting the sequence, and we were past the point where aborting was an option. The sound intensified. The knocking became almost rhythmic again, urgent, organized, like multiple creatures communicating. "Cut's 50% complete," Marcus reported. The first section of pipe gave way. It fell slowly, drifting down to the sea floor below us, and the opening was exposed. My torch beam played across the breach, and I could see inside now, really inside, past the opening, into the deeper sections of the pipe. It was not empty. There was something in there, packed tightly against the walls, something that covered the entire interior surface. It was pale, almost translucent, with a texture that looked almost like, "Is that tissue?" Marcus whispered. "Is that organic matter?" The thing inside the pipe began to move. It started near the breach, flowing toward the opening like something alive and aware. Tendrils of it reached through the cut section, extending into the water. And the other knocking, from the other pipes, from the other sections of the network, became frantic. "We need to close that opening," I said. "We need to seal it, now." "Continue your assessment," Chen ordered. "We need to document what's inside." But I was already moving the submersible back. The tendrils from the pipe were reaching toward us, and I could see now that they weren't random. They were searching. They were reaching for something. For us. "We're aborting," I said. "We're pulling back." "Negative. You will..." Chen's voice was cut off by static. The external monitors flickered. One by one, they went black. The systems were still operational, but the feeds were going down. Something was interfering with them. Something was... That's when I saw it in the viewport. A shape, massive and pale, was moving through the water toward us. Not from the pipe we'd just cut. From somewhere else. From deeper in the network. It was coming toward us, and it was coming fast. "Go, go, go," Marcus was yelling. "Get us out of here." I cranked the controls to full reverse thrust. The submersible's engines whined in protest as I pushed them beyond recommended parameters. We started moving away from the pipeline, away from the shape that was cutting through the water toward us. But there were more of them now. I could see at least 3 distinct forms moving in the darkness around us, converging from different directions. The knocking had stopped. There was only silence now, broken only by the sound of our panicked breathing and the straining engines of our submersible. We'd opened the door, and everything on the other side had come out to greet us. The submersible reached its maximum reverse speed, about 12 knots, not fast enough. I knew it before we'd even accelerated fully. Whatever was chasing us through the water was moving faster. I could see it now, really see it, as it drew closer to our position. It was massive, easily 20 feet long, maybe longer. The body was segmented, almost like a cuttlefish, but the segments didn't move with water-based grace. They moved with purpose, with intention, with something like anger. The head, if it was a head, was dominated by a single eye, enormous and unblinking, and around it, appendages. Dozens of them. Some were thin like tentacles, others thick like muscular limbs. Some had what looked like claws or pincers at their tips. Evasive maneuvers, Marcus was saying, though I was already executing them. Change heading. Increase depth. We need to get below its trajectory. I pushed the control stick down and to the right, angling the submersible deeper and away. The creature adjusted course to follow, its movements fluid and perfect despite its massive size. It was hurting us. I realized that too late. There were 3 of them now. I could see all 3 clearly. One was chasing us directly. The other 2 had flanked us, cutting off escape vectors. They were coordinated. They had tactics. Surface, do you copy? I was still trying the comm, even though I knew it was useless. The static had been total for the last minute. We need immediate assistance. Multiple entities. There, one of the flanking creatures suddenly accelerated, cutting directly across our path. I had to throw the submersible into an emergency dive to avoid collision. We dropped fast, and the creature passed above us, close enough that I could see the texture of its skin, scales or plates, something that caught the light in ways that shouldn't have been possible. It was almost metallic, almost like it wasn't entirely biological. "They're not organic," Marcus said. He was staring at the external monitors, his face pale. "Look at the way they move. Look at the joints. That's not muscle and bone. That's something else." "Hybrid," I said. The word came to me like a memory of something I'd read once, in some deep part of my mind, something they'd taught us about in the early days of deep-sea exploration. Urban legends about what might be living down here, what things might have been created before anyone really understood what they were doing. They're hybrid, biological and mechanical, or something in between. The submersible groaned, metal stressed by the pressure and the aggressive maneuvers. We couldn't keep this up. The vessel wasn't designed for evasive combat. It was designed for precision work, for delicate movements at extreme depth, not for fleeing for our lives. The main creature, the one that had been chasing us directly, was directly ahead now. It had moved into our path again, and I could see it clearly through the forward viewport, the enormous eye fixed on us, the appendages writhing in the water, and the mouth, God, the mouth. It opened, and I realized what I'd been seeing as a unified head was actually segmented jaws, overlapping mandibles that spread open like a flower blooming, revealing rows of structures that might have been teeth, but didn't quite look like anything so simple. They looked like tools, like instruments, like something designed specifically to cut through metal. "Incoming!" Marcus yelled. I wrenched the control stick hard to the left. The submersible heeled over, and I felt the terrible screech of metal scraping metal as one of the creature's appendages caught the edge of our hull. Sparks erupted across the viewport, impossible sparks in the pressurized darkness. The creature's limb was metallic, or at least the tips were. The submersible's alarm began to wail. Red lights flooded the interior of the cabin. I checked the readouts with part of my mind while the rest of it focused on flying this dying machine. "We have a hull breach," Marcus reported, his voice mechanical now, completely calm in a way that only comes when someone has accepted they're going to die. "Starboard side, about 6 inches. We're taking on water. Pressure compensators are starting to fail." The submersible was sinking deeper without my input. The increased internal pressure from the water infiltration was pushing us down. The depth gauge was climbing, 3,500 feet, 3,700 feet, 3,900 feet. I was fighting the controls, trying to get us level, trying to slow the descent, but the water kept coming in. It started as a trickle and became a stream. The temperature inside the cabin dropped instantly. My breath came out in clouds of vapor. "Get us to the surface," Marcus said. He was working the ballast controls, trying to jettison weight, trying to compensate for the added mass of the water. "Get us back to the surface." "I'm trying." I was pushing the engines to their absolute limit, aiming for an upward trajectory. But the creatures, plural, all 3 of them, were still there. They weren't attacking now. They were circling, waiting, watching. The water was up to our ankles now, cold, impossibly cold. My fingers were going numb on the controls. The cabin pressure was changing, becoming uncomfortable, painful in my ears. 4,000 feet, Marcus said. He wasn't checking the gauge. He was just saying it because he could feel it. "We're going deeper." "No." I pulled harder on the stick. "No, we're going up." But the creature in front of us wasn't moving. It was just hovering there, those enormous jaws still open, that massive eye still fixed on us. And I understood suddenly. It wasn't trying to kill us, not directly. It was trying to keep us here, keep us at depth, keep us where the pressure would do the work for it. The water was up to our knees. The cold was becoming everything. Our breath was impossible. The systems were failing one by one. The communication array was completely dead now, the external lights flickering. We had maybe minutes before the pressure differential became too much, before the hull gave way completely, before the ocean rushed in and crushed us like aluminum cans. I felt something break inside me, not physically, mentally. Some part of my brain that had been running on training and protocol and the stubborn refusal to accept that this was happening simply stopped fighting. "I'm sorry," I said to Marcus. "For what?" He was still working the controls, still trying. "We're not dead yet." And that's when the submersible lurched, not from an impact, from something else, something that grabbed the entire vessel and pulled it, hard, sideways. The creature that had been in front of us had moved, and now it had us in one of its appendages, the thick ones, the muscular ones. It was dragging us through the water with terrifying strength. The water inside the cabin surged, suddenly pouring in much faster. We were sinking, really sinking, not gradually anymore, dropping like a stone. Through the viewport, I could see where it was taking us, deeper, toward the seafloor, toward something I couldn't quite make out in the darkness, something vast and geometric that was becoming visible as we sank closer to it. "What is that?" Marcus whispered. It was a structure, not natural, not a pipeline, something much larger, something that looked almost like a temple, or a bunker, or a... The creature pulled us inside an opening in the structure, and the last thing I saw before the viewport, flooded completely with water, was that opening, that yawning darkness, and something inside it, something that made the creatures hauling us in seem small, something that had been waiting for us to open the door. Then there was only cold and pressure, and the sound of metal buckling, and Marcus's hand finding mine in the dark, and the absolute certainty that we were going to die down here, in the crushing black, in a place where no one would ever find us. And still, even as consciousness began to slip away, I could hear it, knocking from all around us, knocking from inside the structure, knocking from inside the creatures, knocking from inside my own head, knocking, knocking, knocking. Everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed. That's what I remember thinking first. Not a coherent thought, but more of a sensation. Hospital, bed, alive. The recognition that I shouldn't be alive was secondary. It came a few seconds after consciousness started reasserting itself, like a problem my brain was too damaged to process at first, but eventually forced to confront. The room was white. Too white. Fluorescent lights that made everything look sterile and unreal. There was a monitor beeping somewhere near my head, measuring my heart rate, my oxygen saturation, the basic metrics of continued existence. My lungs felt like they'd been sandpapered. My throat was raw. My fingers were wrapped in bandages, and I couldn't feel them. I tried to move. Everything hurt. A deep, systemic pain that seemed to originate from my bones rather than my muscles. The decompression sickness, I knew about it intellectually, had trained for emergency decompression scenarios. But knowing about it was different from experiencing it. Every joint in my body felt like it was filled with broken glass. There was a man sitting in a chair beside the bed, not a nurse, not a doctor. Someone in a dark suit, reading a newspaper like he had all the time in the world. He looked up when I made a sound, just a small groan, barely conscious effort, and stood. "Mr. Patterson," he said. His accent was neutral, professionally so. "Welcome back. You've been unconscious for 17 hours. 17 hours. "Marcus," I tried to say, but my voice came out as something between a croak and a whisper. "Where's Marcus?" The man's expression didn't change. "You're going to need some water. Let me get a nurse." He pressed a button, and within seconds, they'd been waiting for me to wake up, I realized. A nurse appeared. She gave me water through a straw, and it was the most painful and wonderful thing I'd ever experienced. The cold liquid hurt going down my throat, but it was real. It grounded me. "Where's Marcus?" I asked again, my voice slightly more functional. "The other diver from your submersible," the suited man said, sitting back down. "He's in critical condition, but stable. He's been sedated for treatment." "What happened?" I asked. "How did we..." "The submersible was flooding. We were sinking. How did we get back?" The suited man exchanged a glance with the nurse, who left the room. Then he leaned forward slightly. "That's the question we were hoping you could answer," he said. "You and Mr. Marcus were found floating at the surface approximately 45 minutes after losing contact with your submersible. Both of you were unconscious. Both of you should have been dead. The submersible was not recovered. Your emergency beacon was active, but your communications equipment was completely non-functional. I tried to process that. We'd been sinking. We'd been pulled into that structure, that impossible place beneath the seafloor. And then, nothing. A gap in my memory, like someone had reached into my brain and deleted 45 minutes of experience. I don't remember, I said. I don't remember surfacing. I don't remember anything after. I stopped. I didn't know what I remembered. The creature's eye, the structure's opening, the cold, the pressure, and then nothing. Blank. After what? The suited man asked. I looked at him properly then. Something about his presence was wrong. This wasn't a standard debriefing. This was interrogation disguised as concern. He wasn't wearing any identification badge. He wasn't hospital staff. "Who are you?" I asked. "My name is irrelevant," he said. "What matters is that you were in a situation that resulted in corporate and governmental interest. The pipeline you were working on, it's not actually a pipeline." "I know," I said. "It's a containment system." He nodded slowly. "What else do you know?" "There are things in it, multiple things. They're intelligent, they're coordinated, they're some kind of hybrid, part biological, part mechanical, and there's something bigger, underneath, below the pipeline network, a structure." The suited man was writing in a small notebook now. "You saw this structure?" "We were being taken to it when—" I stopped again. "When what?" The memory was slippery, resistant, like trying to grab something in water. "I don't know. I don't remember what happened." "That's interesting," the suited man said. "Because your submersible's black box recorded everything until the moment of flooding. There's a clear record of you being pulled toward the structure. And then there's a 7-minute gap where the systems simply went offline. When they came and they back online, the submersible's interior was clear of water." Clear of water. I looked at my hands. The bandaging was extensive, but the skin I could see was red and blistered. Pressure damage, thermal damage. "Your blood work shows salt water in your lungs," the suited man continued. "You were drowned, properly drowned. Your oxygen saturation was at critical levels. Yet here you are, breathing normally." "What do you want?" I asked. "I want to know what happened in that structure. I want to know what you remember, no matter how fragmentary or improbable. I want to know if you have any awareness of anything that occurred during the missing 7 minutes." I closed my eyes, tried to reach into that gap, and something emerged, not a memory exactly, but a sensation, a feeling, the sense of being surrounded by something vast, the sense of being studied, and underneath it all, that knocking, that endless, rhythmic knocking. But there was something else too, a voice, maybe, not heard, but felt. Understanding transferred directly into my mind without the intermediary of language or sound. "We are not finished. The door is open. The door must be closed, or we must come through." "No," I whispered. "No what?" The suited man leaned forward. "No, I'm not. I don't want to remember. I want to forget this. I want to go home and pretend this never happened." "That's not an option," the suited man said. "We need to know what's down there. We need to know if the containment is still viable. We need to know if there's a threat to—" "There's a threat," I interrupted. "Of course there's a threat. You cut open a pipe that was sealed for 37 years. You released something that should have stayed sealed, and now it knows there are other seals, other pipes, other places where things are being kept contained." The suited man's face went pale. "How do you know that?" "Because it told me," I said. "While I was in there, during those 7 minutes you can't find. It told me." He stood abruptly and left the room. I could hear him outside, having a hushed conversation with someone else. The words were muffled, but I caught fragments. Knows too much. Memory loss is incomplete. Need to contain the subject. Director authorization required. Subject. They were thinking of me as a subject now, not a person, not a survivor. A problem that needed solving. I looked at the IV in my arm. Looked at the monitor, still tracking my vitals. Looked at the window across the room that was barred on the outside. I'd thought I was being rescued. I was beginning to realize I might be imprisoned. Marcus, I thought. Where is Marcus? What did they find when they debriefed him? Does he remember the voice? The knocking? And underneath those thoughts, something else. Something that wasn't my thought at all. A constant, rhythmic pressure in the back of my mind. Knock, knock, knock. Even here, even in this hospital room, miles from the ocean, buried in steel and concrete. I could hear it. I could feel it. It was in me. The thing from inside the pipe, or some part of it, or some echo of it that had traveled along pathways I didn't understand. It had ridden my consciousness up through the water, up through the crushing pressure, up to the surface and into this white room where men in suits were debriefing survivors. I didn't know that then, not with certainty, but I suspected it. And I've had 6 months since that day to confirm my suspicions. 6 months of being moved between facilities. 6 months of interrogations and medical tests. 6 months of pretending I don't hear the knocking that never stops. 6 months of watching them get increasingly frustrated that they can't find anything wrong with me. Nothing physiological. Nothing that explains how I survived or what I know. 6 months since I saw Marcus for the last time. He was being transferred from medical when I caught a glimpse of him in a hallway. He saw me. Our eyes met for just a moment. And I saw it. He had the same look I saw in the mirror every morning. The look of someone who knew something that no one else would believe. The look of someone who was being caged, not because of what they'd done, but because of what they'd seen. They separated us after that. I'm writing this down now because I don't know how much longer I can contain the knocking. It's getting louder, it's getting closer, and I've realized something that took me months to understand. It's not in my head, it's coming from outside, from the pipes in the walls of this facility, from the infrastructure underneath this entire complex. Because now that I know what to listen for, I can hear them all. Every sealed container, every pipeline running through this foundation, every place where something has been stored and forgotten. And they're all knocking now, all at once. A symphony of desperate, frantic percussion that only someone like me, someone who's been inside the structure, someone who's carried back a piece of it, can hear. I don't think they're trying to escape. I think they're trying to call to the others. The ones still outside. The ones that live in the deep, in the crushing dark, in places we haven't found yet. I think we opened a door, and now the things on both sides are reaching through to meet. And I think the knocking is getting closer to breaking through. Last night, I heard it in the water pipes in my shower. The night before, I heard it in the walls. This morning, I heard it in my own heartbeat. They're coming. Whatever we sealed down there, whatever we've been trying to keep contained for decades, they're coming. And the worst part? The part I can't tell anyone, the part that will ensure I'm labeled as insane if I even try, part of me wants them to. I've stopped trying to convince them that the knocking is real. After the third psychiatric evaluation, after the medications they kept trying to force on me, after the endless cycles of observation and documentation, I understood. They needed me to be crazy. It was simpler that way. Easier to file away. Easier to forget about. So I stopped mentioning it. I pretended the pills were working. I pretended the knocking had stopped. I pretended I was getting better. It was all a lie, but they seemed to prefer lies to the truth. Last week they moved me to a different facility. This one was smaller, more remote, less medical, more administrative. The kind of place where people like me, people who knew too much, people who couldn't be easily explained away, got filed into permanent holding patterns. I didn't fight the transfer. I'd learned that fighting only made things harder. The new facility is in the mountains, no ocean nearby, or so they tell me. But the knocking is still here. It's always here. It echoes through the pipes in the walls at night. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. Over and over. A rhythm that has become as familiar as my own heartbeat. My new room has a window. That's the main difference. I can see out onto a valley, all mountains and trees, and the distant suggestion of civilization somewhere beyond the horizon. During the day, I sit by the window and watch the landscape. At night, I listen to the knocking and try to understand what it's trying to tell me. Because it is trying to tell me something. I've become certain of that. The knocking isn't random. It follows patterns, complex patterns that shift and evolve. It's language, or mathematics, or music, or something that doesn't have a name in any language we speak. I started keeping a record, tallies on the walls behind the radiator where they can't see. Every knock, every pause, every variation. I've filled 14 pages with notation. I'm starting to see structures emerge, not from the knocking itself, but from the spaces between the knocks. The silences are where the meaning lives. 3 days ago, I started to understand what the message is. It's coordinates, latitude and longitude, encoded into the rhythm of the knocking. And more than just location, there are temporal markers too. Dates, times, windows. The coordinates point to dozens of locations. Some are on land, most are in the ocean, and they're all places where pipelines run, where infrastructure exists that could conceal what needs to be concealed. I've been working through them in my head, calculating, plotting, understanding the scope of what's been sealed away beneath the world's surface. The pipeline we breached was just one small section, one containment cell in a network that spans the globe, the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Arctic, the Mediterranean. There are sealed things in all of them, waiting, knocking, and the dates keep getting closer to present day. The earliest seals date back to the 1940s, before I was born, before most of my colleagues were born. They've been down there for 80 years, trapped in metal tubes, waiting for someone to open the door. And when I cut that pipe, when I breached that seal, I sent a signal, frequency, a message traveling through the network faster than any physical thing could move. I'm awake. The others are hearing me now. Last Tuesday, I overheard 2 orderlies talking. They mentioned something about unusual seismic activity in the Arctic. Small tremors, nothing dangerous, nothing to worry about. But they sounded worried. There was tension in their voices that suggested they'd been briefed on something they weren't supposed to mention to the patients. I know what the tremors are. I can calculate it from the knocking. One of the northern seals is failing. The pressure is building. Something down there is pushing against the barriers that have held it for so long. Something is trying to break free, and it won't be alone. This morning I woke to find that one of the pipes in my room had corroded overnight. Just a small section, nothing obvious. But the corrosion pattern was wrong. It wasn't rust. It was something else, something deliberate, something that looked almost like it had been etched from the inside. I reported it to the medical staff, and they sent someone to patch it, but I'd already seen what I needed to see. The things in the pipes aren't just knocking anymore. They're working, slowly, methodically, wearing away at the infrastructure from the inside, testing weaknesses, finding pressure points, preparing. They're going to get out. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this year, but eventually they're going to break through. And Marcus, I've thought a lot about Marcus. I don't know where they're keeping him, but I know he survived. I know they captured him the same way they captured me. They're probably trying to extract the same information from him that they've been trying to extract from me. They're probably hoping he doesn't remember what I remember, that he doesn't hear what I hear. But I suspect he does. I suspect somewhere in this facility, or another one like it, Marcus is sitting in a room listening to the knocking and understanding exactly what it means. And I suspect he's coming to the same conclusions I have, that we were chosen for a reason, that exposure to the structure, to the things that live there, marked us somehow, changed us, made us into vessels for their thoughts, made us into bridges between their world and ours. I don't think I'm entirely human anymore. I'm not entirely sure I ever was after the structure finished with me. 2 days ago, I noticed something strange in my reflection. My eyes. In certain light, they catch the light differently than they should. Not like normal eyes at all, more like the surface of something metallic. But I stopped looking. Some things aren't meant to be fully understood. Yesterday I tried to escape. I don't know why. Some impulse that might have been mine, or might have been something else whispering to me through the channels that have opened in my mind. I got as far as the hallway before they caught me. Sedatives, restraints, a quiet lecture about self-harm, and the importance of accepting treatment. They didn't understand that I wasn't trying to run away. I was trying to run towards something. The knocking had changed frequency, had become urgent, had seemed to be calling me toward the north, toward where the first seal is failing, toward where the network is becoming active again, toward where the door is opening. I don't know how much longer they're going to keep me here. I don't know if they're going to eventually decide I'm too much of a liability and make me disappear. I don't know if they're going to try harder to extract information or if they're going to give up entirely. But I know what's coming. I can feel it in the knocking. I can taste it in the metallic flavor that sometimes appears in my mouth. I can see it in the corrosion patterns spreading through the pipes, slow and deliberate and utterly unstoppable. The seals are failing. The network is waking up. And I think, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that when the first one breaks, when the first door opens completely, when whatever they've been keeping contained for all these decades finally emerges into the light, I'm going to know exactly what to do. And I'm going to do it without hesitation. Because part of me wants to see it. Part of me, the part that isn't entirely mine anymore, is eager for it. The knocking has stopped as I write this. That's new. That's different. For the first time in 6 months, there's silence. But it's not peaceful silence. It's the silence before something breaks. It's the silence of indrawn breath. It's the silence of anticipation. I can hear it, even though I can't hear it. Do you understand? The knocking has gone inside. It's in the structure now. It's in the networks beneath the networks. It's in the places where the old systems interface with the new ones. It's spreading through the infrastructure of the world like a virus, like a word that's been whispered through the dark and is now reaching understanding in millions of tiny nodes simultaneously. And very soon, I don't know how soon, but the urgency in the silence tells me it's soon, that understanding is going to bear fruit. There's a knock at my door right now, not from the pipes, a real knock. Someone's here to see me. I don't know who, but as I get up to answer it, I realize I'm smiling. I haven't smiled since this started. I don't think I'm entirely sure I remember how, but I'm smiling anyway because I think it's finally time. Time for the door to open. Time for the knocking to stop. Time for whatever comes next. Knock, knock, knock. Editor's note. The following section was added after this document was discovered in a sealed container at the facility mentioned in the narrative. The identity of the author and the location of the facility remain classified. The document was originally filed as a psychiatric patient's delusional journal. Reclassification of its contents is currently under review. All emergency protocols have been elevated to maximum. Seismic activity at Arctic Facility 7 has increased to critical levels. Seal integrity at the main pipeline nexus has dropped to 34% capacity. Communication from the facility ceased at 14:47 GMT. A recovery team has been dispatched. Recovery is not anticipated. The following message was received at 19:23 GMT from the Mariana Trench Deep Monitoring Station. Knocking intensifying across all monitored frequencies. Something is waking up. Something is... The transmission ended abruptly. We do not yet know what emerges when all the seals break. We are not making that mistake again. God help us. We are trying not to make that mistake again. But the knocking continues. It is knocking everywhere now. It has always been knocking. It will not stop until the door opens. And the door, I fear, is already opening.